They sent their best. Warriors who had never lost a battle. Soldiers who had conquered entire star systems. Champions who wore their scars like medals of honor. Every single one of them ran. Not from a monster. Not from a weapon. Not from a war. They ran from her. A queen so powerful, so terrifying, so completely alone, that no living being in the galaxy had ever dared to stay in her presence longer than 60 seconds. But then something happened that nobody predicted. A human showed up. Not a soldier. Not a hero. Not a diplomat. A mechanic. A regular, grease-stained, sleep-deprived human mechanic named Cole, who had no idea what he was walking into. And what he did next changed everything. Today you are going to hear the full story. The rage, the silence, the moment that broke a queen wide open, and the truth about why one ordinary man succeeded where every elite warrior in the galaxy failed. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The distress signal came in at 3:42 in the morning. Cole was already awake. He was always awake at that hour. Sleep had never been easy for him, not since he left Earth 2 years ago to work aboard the Helix station, a mid-range repair dock floating somewhere between the third and fourth quadrant of deep space. It was not a glamorous job. He fixed engines. He patched hull fractures. He replaced burned-out power cells and unclogged fuel lines that smelled like something had died inside them. The pay was decent. The solitude was something he had learned to live with. When the signal hit his console, he almost ignored it. Almost. The coordinates were unusual. The signal was not coming from a ship in distress. It was coming from a planet. A planet that, according to the station database, was listed as restricted, flagged in red, tagged with 3 warning symbols that Cole had never seen before on any file. He leaned closer to the screen. The signal was repeating, over and over, a low mechanical pulse with one embedded data line that translated into simple galactic standard. It said, emphasis life support failing. NON combatant presence requested, emphasis. Cole read it 3 times. NON combatant. That was a very specific word choice. He pulled up everything the station database had on that planet. Most of the files were locked behind clearance levels he did not have. But the public record was enough to make his stomach tighten. The planet was called Veilthari Prime, home world of the Veilthari Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. They had never lost a war. They had never signed a treaty from position of weakness. Their technology was rumored to be centuries ahead of anything humans had built. And their queen, the one the files simply called Empress Sale, had not received a single visitor in over 4 years. Cole found that strange. Empresses did not just stop receiving visitors. He kept reading. 4 years ago, during a diplomatic summit, something happened. The files did not say what. But after that summit, every ambassador, every suitor, every warrior delegate that had been sent to the palace had returned within the hour. Some of them refused to speak about what they had experienced. 2 of them had reportedly requested psychological evaluations upon return. One of them, a decorated military general from the Kreth Alliance, a being who had survived 17 battlefield engagements, had simply said one thing when asked why he left. He said, "She is not safe." Cole sat back in his chair. A normal person would have closed the file right there, flagged the signal for someone with more authority, gone back to bed. Cole opened the navigation panel instead. He told himself it was just curiosity. He told himself he would fly close enough to get a better reading on the life support data, confirm it was a real emergency, and then report it to the station commander. He did not report it to the station commander. 3 hours later, His small single-pilot repair shuttle was breaking atmosphere over Valthari Prime. The planet was stunning. Even from the cockpit window, Cole could see the scale of it, silver mountains that caught the light like mirrors, wide violet plains stretching out beneath cloud systems that moved too slowly, too deliberately, like they were thinking. The palace was visible from orbit. It sat at the center of a vast plateau, white and enormous, surrounded by crystal spires that rose from the ground like the planet itself was trying to protect it. Every approach path around the palace showed zero activity. No guards, no ships, no movement at all. Just silence. Cole landed in the outer courtyard because it was the only flat surface his navigation system could confirm as structurally stable. He sat in his cockpit for a long moment after the engines went quiet. The life support warning was still pulsing on his console. Something inside that palace needed help. Something real. He grabbed his toolkit. He got out of the ship. And the moment his boots touched the stone ground of Valthari Prime, the temperature dropped by 10 degrees, and every light inside the palace went dark. Cole did not run. He probably should have. Every rational thought in his head was suggesting, quite strongly, that getting back in the ship and leaving immediately was the correct decision. But Cole had a habit that had gotten him into trouble his entire life. When something did not make sense, he needed to understand it. He stood in the courtyard and waited. The darkness inside the palace did not move. No sound came from within. No alarm. No voice. Just a thick, pressing silence that felt almost physical, like the air itself was holding its breath. After about 90 seconds, a single light came back on. It was deep inside the palace. Far down a corridor, he could barely see through the massive open archway at the entrance. A pale blue light, steady and low, like an emergency backup system kicking inches. Cole walked toward it. The inside of the palace was extraordinary. Even with only the low emergency lighting, he could see the craftsmanship of it. The walls were carved from something that was not quite stone and not quite metal, a pale silver material that seemed to absorb the light and release it slowly, like it was breathing. The ceilings were impossibly high. The floors were smooth and cold beneath his boots. Everything was perfect, and everything was abandoned. There were signs of life everywhere, or what used to be life. A half-empty cup of something on a side table near a window. A long ceremonial robe draped over the back of a carved chair. A data tablet left face down on the floor of a wide corridor. Its screen cracked. It looked less like a palace, and more like a place where someone had simply stopped one day and never continued. Cole followed the blue light. It led him deeper into the palace, through 3 corridors and down a long descending staircase, until he reached a sealed door. The light was coming from the panel beside it, a dim blue pulse that matched the life support signal exactly. He opened his toolkit. The panel was not complicated. Whatever the Valthari had built it from, the underlying logic of the circuit architecture was similar enough to systems he had worked on before. He had the door open in 11 minutes. The room behind it was a power core chamber. And it was failing. Not catastrophically, not yet. But 3 of the main distribution nodes had gone offline, and the backup systems were running on reserve cells that had maybe 6 more hours before they depleted completely. Without the power core, the atmospheric processors in the upper levels of the palace would shut down. The temperature regulation would fail. The air filtration would stop. Cole got to work. He did not stop to think about whether he was supposed to be there. He did not stop to calculate the risk. A system was broken. He knew how to fix it. That was the entire extent of his decision-making process. He was 40 minutes into the repair when he heard her. He did not hear footsteps. He did not hear a door open. He simply became aware. in that sudden way that the back of the human brain registers a threat before the conscious mind catches up, that he was no longer alone in the room. He turned around slowly. She was standing at the entrance to the power core chamber. She was tall, taller than any human, taller than most species Cole had encountered in 2 years of deep space work. She wore a dark robe that was nothing like the ceremonial images Cole had pulled up on the database. Her silver-blue skin caught the light in the same way the palace walls did. Her white hair was loose and tangled, not arranged. Her eyes pale blue, luminous, the kind of eyes that looked like they had light behind them rather than in front, were fixed on him with an expression that Cole could not immediately read. It was not anger. Not yet. It was something closer to disbelief. She looked at him the way someone looks at a thing that should not exist. Cole looked back at her and said the first thing that came into his head. He said, "Emphasis, your Node 3 coupling is completely stripped. Do you have a replacement part anywhere in this building? Emphasis." The silence that followed was the loudest silence Cole had ever experienced. Empress Sale of the Velthari did not move. She did not speak. She simply stared at him with those luminous pale eyes, and Cole had the very clear impression that she was deciding something important. He had the secondary impression that what she was deciding might involve him specifically. He turned back to the power core and kept working. He did not know why he did that. Later, when he thought about it, he could not fully explain his own reasoning. Maybe it was because the job was not finished. Maybe it was because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. Maybe it was simply that Cole had spent his entire life in situations where powerful people or powerful systems surrounded him, and the only thing that had ever kept him steady was focusing on the task in front of him. The repair needed to be done, so he did the repair. Behind him, he heard her take one step into the room. Then another. She stopped about 4 feet away from him, close enough that he could hear her breathing. It was slow and measured, like someone who was very carefully controlling something that did not want to be controlled. She said, in galactic standard that was precise and cold, "You should not be here." Cole did not look up from the circuit panel. The life support signal said N-O-N combatant presence requested. He said, "I am about as N-O-N combatant as it gets." Another silence. "That signal," she said, emphasis, was sent by the automated emergency system. "It was not sent by me," emphasis. "I've understood," Cole said. Emphasis, but the power core is still failing. So, emphasis. He heard something then that he could not quite identify. It was not a word. It was a short, sharp exhale, almost like she had been about to say something and had stopped herself. He thought, though he was not certain, that it might have been the beginning of a laugh. He did not look back to check. Over the next 2 hours, Cole worked on the power core and Sale stood in the room. She did not help. She did not interfere. She watched. Once, when he needed to reach component behind the main housing unit, and his arm was not quite long enough, he asked her without thinking, without looking at her, in the same tone he would have used asking a fellow mechanic if she could hold the secondary panel open while he reached in. She held the panel open. Neither of them commented on this. By the time Cole finished the repair and the main power nodes came back online, all 3 of them, green-lit and stable, the life support indicators climbing back to normal across the board, it was past midnight by Velthari local time. He packed his toolkit. He stood up, stretched his back, and turned to face her properly for the first time. She was watching him with that same unreadable expression, but something in it had shifted. The edge of it had changed. The disbelief was still there, but it had softened into something else. Something more complicated. "Why did you stay?" she asked. Cole considered the question. "The job wasn't finished," he said. "The others," she said slowly. Emphasis left within minutes. Most of them within seconds. They were warriors, decorated soldiers, diplomats trained to endure hostile environments. You are / emphasis, she paused, looking at his jacket, at the grease on his hands, a repair technician. A mechanic, Cole said. Yeah. And you were not afraid. Cole picked up his toolkit bag. I didn't say that, he said. Emphasis, I was afraid the whole time. I just had something to do, emphasis. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Past the height and the luminous eyes, and the weight of whatever it was she carried around with her like a second atmosphere. She looked exhausted. Not physically. Something deeper than that. When did you last eat? He asked. Her expression fractured, just slightly, like a wall that had developed a hairline crack. She did not answer. Cole set his toolkit bag back down. He found the palace kitchen by following the corridor that logically should have led to one. It did. The kitchen was large and cold, and had clearly not been used in a long time. The storage units still had food in them, preserved, sealed, a variety of things Cole could not identify alongside, handful of items that looked familiar enough to work with. He found something that behaved like a heating element. He found sealed containers of what appeared to be a grain-based staple. He made something simple. 2 portions. He carried them back to the power core chamber because that was where he had left her. She was still there. She was sitting on the floor against the far wall. Not on a chair. Not on any of the elevated surfaces in the room. On the floor, with her knees drawn up slightly, her head tilted back against the wall, her eyes closed. She looked, in that moment, like someone who had been standing for a very long time and had simply stopped. Cole sat down on the floor a few feet away and put one of the portions next to her without saying anything. She opened her eyes and looked at the food. Then at him. You cooked, she said. Loosely, Cole said. She looked at the food for another long moment. Then she picked it up. They ate in silence. It was not uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that exists between 2 people who have, somehow, without planning it, arrived at a moment of honesty. After a while, she spoke. They fear me, she said, because I stopped pretending. Cole waited. 4 years ago, she continued, her voice low and even, emphasis at the summit on Keth Orbital. A suitor from the Draven Collective insulted the memory of my predecessor during a formal ceremony. He did it quietly, diplomatically, with a smile, the kind of insult that is designed to land without leaving marks, emphasis. She paused. I did not respond diplomatically. Cole nodded slowly. After that, she said, emphasis, the delegation stopped coming. Or rather, they still came. But they came afraid. And fear changes people. It makes them careful and small and dishonest. I could not bear it. So I stopped receiving them, emphasis. And the life support, Cole asked. I dismissed the palace staff 8 months ago, she said simply. Emphasis, I told myself I preferred solitude. I did not anticipate how quickly the maintenance systems would begin to degrade without regular attention. Emphasis. Cole nodded again. So you've been alone here for 8 months? Yes. In this entire palace? Yes. Cole looked around the power core chamber, at the vast empty corridors beyond it, at the single dim light that had led him here. That sounds, he said carefully, really awful. She turned to look at him, not with anger, not with the cold precision she had used when she first spoke to him. With surprise. Everyone else, she said quietly, treats my solitude as a choice to be respected. Is it?" Cole asked. She did not answer for a long time. "No," she finally said. "Didn't think so," Cole said. He looked at her then, at this queen who had frightened away warriors and generals and diplomats, who had been alone in a silent palace for 8 months, who had eaten a meal on a power core chamber floor with a human mechanic she had never met, and he saw something that none of those warriors had stayed long enough to see. He saw someone who was not frightening at all. He saw someone who was just deeply, completely, bone-tired of being misunderstood. And without making a decision about it, without calculating the risk or the protocol or the 10,000 reasons it was probably not appropriate, Cole reached over and put his hand gently over hers where it rested on the floor. He did not say anything. She looked down at his hand. Then she looked up at him. And for the first time in 4 years, Empress Sale of the Velthari Empire did not look like someone holding a wall up against the world. She just looked like someone who had finally, unexpectedly, been seen. He told himself it was because there were more systems in the palace that needed checking. The atmospheric processors on the upper levels had developed a pressure imbalance. 2 of the heating circuits in the east wing were running at reduced capacity. The water reclamation system had an intermittent fault that nobody had addressed. There was genuinely a lot of work to do. But if he was being honest with himself, and Cole had a strong preference for honesty, even when it was inconvenient, the truth was that he stayed because she asked him to. Not formally, not with ceremony or command. She had simply said, on the morning after the power core repair, that if he had no immediate obligation elsewhere, the palace systems could use a thorough inspection. He had no immediate obligation elsewhere. So he stayed. They developed a rhythm that surprised them both. Cole would work through the morning, moving through the palace with his toolkit, fixing the things that needed fixing. Sale would appear, sometimes watching from a doorway, sometimes sitting nearby, sometimes walking with him through the long silver corridors as he talked through what he was doing and why. She was extraordinarily intelligent. That was something Cole had not anticipated, though later he felt slightly embarrassed for not anticipating it. She asked precise, incisive questions about everything he worked on. She picked up technical concepts quickly, faster than most trained engineers Cole had worked with. By the second day, she was handing him tools before he asked for them, anticipating the sequence of the work by watching the logic of it unfold. On the second evening, she showed him the observatory at the top of the palace's tallest spire. It was breathtaking. The room was open to the atmosphere through a transparent dome that adjusted its opacity in real time, and the view of the Velthari system's star cluster filled the entire ceiling in vivid, unfiltered detail. Cole sat there for a long time without speaking, which he rarely did. "This is where I come," Sale said, "when everything else is too heavy." Cole understood that completely. On the third day, as he was running the final checks on the atmospheric system, she found him in the upper corridor and stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. "You will leave today," she said. It was not a question. "My station shift starts tomorrow morning," Cole said. Emphasis, "I've already missed 2 days. My supervisor is probably concerned." Emphasis. "Probably," she said. He finished the check, closed the access panel, and stood up. They stood in the corridor together for a moment. "You can send the distress signal again," Cole said. Emphasis, "if anything else fails. I'll come back." Emphasis. "That signal is for emergencies," she said. "As I know," Cole said. She looked at him. "What if there is no emergency?" Cole picked up his toolkit. "Then send a different signal," he said. "I'll still come." He walked down the long corridor toward the entrance. His boots made quiet sounds on the silver floor. The palace looked different now than it had when he arrived. The lights were all on. The systems were running properly, and the air had lost that heavy, stagnant quality. It felt less like an abandoned place. At the entrance archway, he stopped and turned back. She was standing at the far end of the corridor, watching him leave, tall and still, with her white hair loose around her shoulders and the light of the restored palace around her. She looked like what she was, a queen. Powerful, extraordinary. And she was not running. Neither was he. He raised one hand in a simple wave. After a moment, just a moment, she raised hers in return. Cole walked out into the silver courtyard, got into his ship, and lifted off from Vaelthari Prime as the sun was rising over the crystal spires. 3 weeks later, a new signal arrived at his console. Not a distress signal. Just coordinates, and one line of galactic standard text. It said, "Emphasis, the observatory is better at night. Come when you can, emphasis." Cole was already setting the navigation. Here is the thing nobody talks about. Every warrior who ran from Empress Sail was afraid of her power, her rage, her unpredictability. But Cole was not unafraid. He said it himself, he was afraid the whole time. The difference was that Cole did not let fear make the decision. He let the work make the decision. He let the moment make the decision. He let her make the decision. And in doing that, in simply staying, simply seeing, simply treating her like a person instead of a force of nature, he gave her something 4 years of isolation had taken away. He gave her proof that she was worth staying for. The most powerful thing in any universe is not a weapon or a fleet or a throne. It is one person choosing not to leave. If this opened your eyes, keep watching. So let us recap what just happened in this story. An empress who had driven away every elite warrior in the galaxy was not defeated by strength. She was reached by kindness, by presence, by one ordinary human who stayed because the job was not finished, and then stayed because she asked him to. Cole did not have power. He did not have status. He had tools, a willingness to work, and the ability to see a person instead of a reputation. That is HFY at its core. Humanity wins not because we are the strongest, but because we refuse to stop showing up. If this story hit you the way it hit us, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love stories like this. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new HFY story. We post every week. And here is your question for the comments. If you were Cole, would you have gotten back in the ship, or would you have stayed? Tell us below. Next up, watch the story of the last human diplomat who ended a 1,000-year war with one sentence. You will not want to miss it.